Well, you already heard from me earlier in the introductory talk. Just a little bit about my career and where I'm from. So I did my bachelor's in Singapore and then my PhD in the US before moving to the Netherlands for a postdoc, where I still have a position in Radboud University Medical Center. I also am chair of the Young Academy of Europe. For about a year, I worked at GE Healthcare part-time while also maintaining my academic position. And currently, I'm transitioning to work at my spin-off company, Senya Imaging. So it's been quite a long career, and I've moved around quite a bit. And just to tell you a little bit about my experience with grant writing, very quickly, I received an NWO VANI and, of course, an ERC starting grant, which really helped to build my career, and also other grants from the ERCs, namely the proof of concept. Actually, 2 of them, and other fellowships. And what I'm going to talk about today is what I felt I've learned from these experiences in general, but focused on the ERC itself. The first thing you need, of course, is a good idea. This goes without saying. You can't go anywhere without that. So let's assume that you have a good idea. In my experience, it's always best to start early, and this is easy to say, even though you know the deadlines are far away. Somehow nothing happens until the last few weeks, but it really does help to start earlier, especially because it also allows you to take breaks in writing, and that gives you more distance to what you're writing, so you can see sometimes you don't see the forest for the trees, and so this kind of distance really helps. I also found it really, really useful to listen to other people and to talk to other people for advice. So one of the things I did, which I think was key to my success in this grant, was speaking to other people who had written it. So even people I didn't know, I just approached some people in my institute or around me who had these grants and talked to them about the whole process, including how the interview went and what they felt were the most important points to bring out. They don't need to be in your field. It's just really more about the experience and how the grant is structured and written rather than the topic itself. Then I think it's really about the details. So this is actually, it's a screenshot of the folder I had to organize this. You can see that I had several grants from other people that they were willing to share with me. I made a whole kind of list of advice that I felt was most important to me that I received from other people who had been through the process as I described earlier. And then all the documents from the ERC, including the panel members and the reviewer documents. And I think these are really important. You need to read the call text very carefully, word by word. And you also need to understand who is going to be evaluating your grant and on what basis. So what their criteria for evaluation are to make sure that you hit that. And it's important for you to know who the panel will be, because this is whom are going to read your proposal. So you need to make sure that whatever you write is understandable to them and is exciting for them. So this is an example of what I did. So this is the key text in the call itself, and you really need to identify the keywords for the ERC. I think it's really the high gain, high risk profile. I also tried to tailor everything for what the grant was asking for, including, for example, my CV. So I thought about what sections to put in and what kind of order to have, and to follow the requirements exactly for page limits, font size, margins, etc. You need to assume that nothing is obvious. So things like abbreviations, which you think everybody would know, like in the Netherlands, everyone knows the NWO, which is the main funding organization, but you need to spell it out for them. And be clear on what the committee is looking for, which you will know from the reviewer text, and try and highlight this in everything that you're writing. It's really important to keep in mind that the reviewers, and I've been in the situation of reviewing grants like this, and although it's fun and it's exciting and you want to do your part, it can get quite boring and tiring sometimes to read so many grants. So make it easy for them. Don't have the fonts too small and squeezed together, or the formatting all difficult and with a lot of typos. make it easy for them to understand your message. Yeah, so I like to work with tables, for example, and to have box text, if you like, to highlight what you're saying, and of course figures and headings and subheadings. Just remember whom your reviewer is when you are writing your grant. So that's it. So that's a very brief summary of what I think are the main points that you need to keep in mind when you're writing your grant. And if you have any questions, you're welcome to contact any of us during this event, or also just you can contact us online. Thank you.
Okay, I will take over from here, but as Mangala said, I think it would be nice if you already start sharing some of your questions. So the way I arranged my presentation was indeed by posing or trying to collect questions and things that I've learned as well through my experience. So the first time I applied, for instance, I did not receive it. And I will try to also share what I think it was why. If I can go on with the slides. Let's see. Okay, now I can. So one of the most important things, Mangala already kind of anticipated it a little bit, is the timeline. As she said, it always looks far away, right? The deadline. And you said, oh, I'm going to have a lot of time. When actually, if we really break it down to the amount of time you need, I would say start thinking even a year before, right? Some ideas need to deposit in your head before you can really polish them. And so you don't need to start writing a year in advance because that's probably too early, right? But what you can do is to start testing your ideas as well. Like it's true that everyone says it's not necessary to include pilot data. I agree, it's not necessary, but they will help you to test whether your idea is feasible or not, or to see whether there are going to be problems that you could not foresee. So if you are in a position in which you can already try with some little things that you might need to support your idea, just do it, because it will help your growth in growing together with your idea. And first of all, the other thing that is very important is that you yourself need to be convinced by your own idea. That's the only way you can really sell it, because you have to sell your idea, right? So if you're not convinced yourself, it's not going to work for anybody else. And so you need to really ask yourself, am I ready to apply? And of course, the CV also matters at one point at the stage you are in your career, because if you are too junior, or in the sense that you don't have enough publication that support that you can actually do research, you have less chances. Of course, the CV is not the only thing, but it does kind of matter to a certain extent, especially if you want to show that you are the person that will be able to run that project. So the first round, for instance, of my ERC grant, I was proposing to develop a scale to measure some characteristics of human beings. And then one of the comments was, well, I don't think you are the person that could develop a scale, because I don't see right in your CV that you ever developed a scale. So of course, it doesn't mean that you cannot do it now, but then you really need to show somehow, if you don't have it in your CV, that you can. And that's where I failed, for instance, the other time. And when you consider the time, you need to really take into account also not just yourself. I mean, you could consider, okay, I'm going to be a very quick writer. In 3 weeks are enough. Sure. But if you take 3 weeks before the deadline, you need to take into account that others have to sign forms for you. So you need to think that they might not have time when you need them, or they might be on holiday, as it happened to me a couple of times, and they might be on holiday for 3 weeks. And for instance, you want people to read your proposal, give you feedbacks, and you want to have the time to go through it again and again, or you want to give to have the time to speak with other people, and all these kind of aspects. And most importantly, as Mangala also and others have stressed, you do need to take time to read the documentation and to get acquainted with the website. I mean, honestly, I cannot say it's the most, user-friendly website I ever saw. So you really need to get acquainted to it and try to find all the documents and see what you can do, what you cannot do, and what you need to ask for help. And this is very important. You will need some help. Same things. Let me see whether I forgot. Anything I noted here, because I was not reading, of course. I think I did. I went most of it.
Can I make a point about the preliminary data?
Sure.
So for the ERC, they talk about this high risk, high gain profile. So on the one hand, it's not the typical grant where you kind of want to show enough preliminary data to show that you will succeed. I think here you need to get the balance right. So there still should be some risk in there. So you don't need too much preliminary data. Do you agree, Valeria?
Yes, I totally agree. I think that when I was speaking about preliminary data was more speaking about data that can convince you that you're going the right way. So it's not that you already did your project, because that's probably very unlikely, and then it means that you already have a lot of money. But just to test a few things or to try to understand, because often, at least to me, it happened that during the developing of the idea, I could take different routes. And which one do you really want to take? Maybe you have data that can help you to decide. But yeah, I agree. And that's what I was referring to as well. And also this risk. I mean, it is true that they want a risky project, but for 2 times, I mean, also in my last time when I kind of successfully received the grant, the comment I received was, don't you think that this is a little bit too risky? So we really need to find the right balance between bringing something that is a bit too much on the risky side, because that can also play against you. For instance, I proposed to use the ultrasound stimulation in humans already when the field just started to use this technique in humans. And they basically asked me to remove that part from the project. So the next question is, does the project hold, so it's innovation and interest, does it hold even without that part? So if you present in a project aspects, different levels of novelty, sometimes in the topic, sometimes also in the methodology that you use, try to make a project that can hold even if some parts don't work. I think that would really give you a much stronger chances to succeed, because they can always say, no, this is too much, and then feasibility is not there, and then what is left is not enough to bring the field forward. So I think, again, I would like to stress that people that will read your proposal not only have many proposals to read, they are also tired, as Mangala said, and you need to write it in a very simple, clear way. And when you write it, of course, you have the enthusiasm to go into the details. And for you, these details seems to be the most important things of the whole proposal. But for somebody that is not exactly in your micro field, these details don't really come across as so important unless you're really able to communicate the why to your committee. And a good way that I found to be very useful in communicating this is to really trying to find examples that make what you study kind of relevant for your audience. I mean, independently of the field that you belong to or you are in, I mean, you need to ask yourself, okay, what kind of bigger question am I addressing with my proposal? It's not just an incremental research, it's something that goes beyond. So what is the question that can really bring my proposal, can make my proposal interesting for other people? How can I make it simple enough for others to understand why it is important that we are going to study this and this and this and this. So whenever, if you can, whether you have a molecule that you need to present or like a behavioral task in humans, you can always think of examples that make what you're doing relevant for your audience. And then one of the issues that often is encountered is this problem of dependency. So sometimes you split your application in work packages, and of course some of them would be very interesting when there are dependency. Like if first you start with work package 1, you discover something. If based on the discovery you're gonna, for instance, follow up with this and this. But for many, this is a challenge to feasibility. So if you have packages that are interdependent, from my personal experience, I would really advise that you always present a plan B. What if it does not work? Then, okay, I can do this, this, and this instead.
Valeria, there's a question asking how many times did you apply for your project?
2. So the first time I didn't go through, the second time I did.
Okay.
And then what it also helps is that if you think of your project even beyond the 5 years, right? Really think big. That's what I want to discover, and then break it down in more, in goals that you can reach in a year, 2, in 5. But the idea can be bigger. Don't be scared about that. And when I say I write here, you're addressing every single required aspect. And if you see here, I write ethics. So I don't know how many of you are working with human participants, or with where you really have to do a lot of ethic that you might perceive as trivial, but it's actually not. So for animal work, people are all aware of the ethic component. So it doesn't come as a surprise that you need to be very much aware of all the ethical concerns. But when you work with humans, despite we always apply to our local ethical committee, you need to take into account that maybe at the European level, they think a bit differently than what you've been doing so far within your country. So there are differences also across countries for what is ethically allowed and what is not, or how you need to express it. And I lost about a year to try to convince the European ethic that what I was doing, it was kind of okay. And despite having all the permissions already from the local committees, and the Netherlands is also one of the countries that is very much advanced from the ethical point of view, very well organized, and everything is clear. So despite that, I took about a year to be able to start my grant. So I would say don't underestimate the ethic and maybe every single part of the grant. Another thing that helps is try not to promise what you cannot deliver. Sometimes you want to put accents on one of the part of the projects, and you think that to sell it you can promise a bit more than what you can actually do in the 5 years. Well, try not to do that, because it can really play against you. If people are suspicious about the feasibility, that will not help. Do you have questions already? I think I have 1 minute more, and then I'm done. Yeah, maybe I finish, and then you guys. And something that was mentioned in the plenary session is that the 2B1 and B2 are very different, and they also. But I'm not sure whether you have clear in your mind that they really target different people. So the way you write them should be complementary and not necessarily exactly the same, but they have to nicely complement. So the B1 is for people for which you need to really make it clear, be simple, not go into many details of the technique, because they might be expert, but not expert of your own field. They are the member of the panels, so they come from different disciplines. And in the B2, the one that goes to the expert, on the other hand, you want to be showing as well that you know exactly what you're talking about. And there you have a bit more freedom and more space to describe more in details what you actually propose to do in particular in the methodological part. And let's see. Yes, I have two last slides about the CV. I think a lot has been said. So I will not spend too much time. I would like to really make one point again, is that the quality indicators that you will choose to show that you are the person that is able to do your grant also depends by the panel. So there are panels that where people only publish in Science, Nature, and then you have other panels where they publish more into journals that are around, I don't know, the old impact factor 12. So you need to compare yourself also with what is expected from the people that are in your panel. Of course, this is going to be a bit of a mess in the future, because finally we are realizing that there are more cross-panel domains, so people apply grants that really are cross domains, where it becomes a bit more difficult to have a fair comparison. But just keep it in mind and ask around again. And then, yeah, I would say that's enough. And the other thing is that when you take the time, if we go back of the first slide, when you're preparing your grant and you plan some time for it, taking into account to negotiate with the host institute, right? So you need to choose the best institute for you, but not in the terms of the institutes that, because as it has been said in the plenary lecture, basically the institute, your grant is not valued based on the institute you are in. But some institutes will be able to facilitate your work better than others. And this plays an important role in feasibility and possibility to make breakthrough. Because if you go to an institute that doesn't, for instance, if you are planning behavioral experiments in rodents, and you go to an institute that does not have any rodent research yet, you need to take into account that you will spend at least a year, if not more, to start before you are able to run this research. So I would say take some time to look around and to negotiate also with the institution already before you get the grant. And then, of course, once you get the grant, you can negotiate even more, or you can already ahead of time say, okay, if I win the grant, shall we agree on these and these as a minimum kind of starting point? Because, of course, institutions are always happy to welcome an ERC grantee, but they are not all equally offering what you need. So try to think yourself what you need and which one would be the best place to run your research. I see a lot of questions, so maybe I should just stop and answer. And Mangala, what do you think? Can we just answer a few questions, and then if there is extra time, I can go on a little bit. Otherwise, I stop.
Yeah, sure. I think we did answer many of the questions until the one about the how many. So you answered how many times you applied, and then there was a question on the ethics. Do you see that?
Yeah. Oof. Okay, so the ethics was really hard. So I read all the literature that was related. So the ethical problem was that I putting participants in having to choose between a very mild shock on the hand and some monetary reward. But the money is for yourself and the shock is for the other. What I use is something that I would not even consider pain. But of course, if you know a little bit all the movies on Milgram, Stanford experiment, there is a bit of a history on this part. And then the problem is when people just look at the movies or have a bit of a general knowledge of the problems instead of really maybe being updated on the latest ethical kind of discussion about a few things, right? So what I did I was in contact. I had a reference person in the ERC that I was in contact with, and I wrote 23 pages of all the the research I could find on the topic, and at least that convinced them to have an interview in Brussels. And when you go when you arrive to have a meeting with them in Brussels, then they will ask for experts to come. And then it was very easy in a way, because at least the experts were really familiar with the problem. And so we kind of easily reached an agreement on what was accepted and what is a bit more problematic. So, I mean, I would advise get the ready before, but I had the ethic ready before. So again, you just need to be very well prepared and be ready to fight. Don't give up. If you believe that what you're doing is ethical, I think you can just go ahead, read, and don't be scared. Go to the meeting and try to fight for what you want to do. I mean, I'm not saying not to care. I'm saying you need to care, but you know the knowledge that you have might be different from others. So you need to be sure that what you're doing is correct, and then fight for it.
Can I add to that?
Mm-hmm.
So in my case, we also had a lot of in vivo experiments, and there was the possibility for clinical trial. So I had a letter from an ethical advisor. So I had to appoint an ethical advisor who then looked at it and wrote that he approved of the ethical value of the proposal. So that was really important. And he had to write periodic reports as well to the ERC. And also on the environmental side, we also need to show that any of the chemicals and the processes we are using are not going to be harmful to the environment, or at least that we will take care of the disposal properly. So all of this, it's quite a lot of paperwork, and that's why it's really useful to start early, because these things you might not notice until the submission date, which is then too late when you go into the system.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It took months and months.
Yeah.
Yeah. You think can be a common unsuccessful point that may ruin the proposal. What do you think? I'm not sure I understand the question.
I think if there's anything you have seen that is pretty common, but that will really destroy the proposal, right? From what I've seen in reviewing proposals, if the novelty and the value or the impact are not clear, like if we don't understand why you will want to do this and what the benefits will be, then I think that's going to fail.
Yeah, and there is another question that says about B1 and B2, which one suggests writing first? So I kept switching back and forth in the sense that at one point I started B1 because it would help me to have a bigger of an overview, but then I switched to B2 because I had the need to define the details in order to clarify some of the implications and become broad again. So to me, it was really switching back and forth. I don't know for you, Mangala, what...
No, I agree. I don't think you can consider them as separate documents. They are read by different people, but they are linked. So you can't write one and then the other. You have to go back and forth. There were two questions before. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. No, I was saying that's also in the structure, that at one point you need to find a very coherent structure where you can find it back in both B1 and B2. And that's also why it requires switching back and forth. So do we have a risk if the different parts of the proposal are too separate instead of too dependent? Well, I think you need to simply to explain why you have these two parts. So, for instance, in mine, I have one part that is just technology, development of a technique. So you have some animal work to develop the technique, and one part is just decision making in humans. But then, to me, my connection was, okay, if we manage to develop this technique, I will be able to answer questions related to decision making that cannot be answered otherwise. Of course, it will not probably happen within the 5 years, But in order to answer everything, we need both components to go forward.
And if I can add to that, I think you want to show that they are not, it's not a flow in the sense that if one doesn't work, if work package one doesn't work, that your whole project is blocked. You can have such go and no-go points, I think, later in the project, but not in the beginning, because then your project will just stop. But at the same time, it needs to be a coherent whole, so it needs to be part of one project. Otherwise, why are they there, right? Yeah, but I think it's clear when you start writing.
So where is the best page to see successful ERC starting grants to get ideas of grant sizes?
Everyone asks for the max, I think. Most people go for the 1.5. But you don't have to. But these are on the website, on the ERC website, although I'm not sure they give the total amount.
Yeah, I'm not sure either. But it's always, I would also advise to go for the max.
But you don't have to. You can write a
No.
smaller grant. I see the question on budget allocation. That your host institute will need to support you because the salaries and the costs will usually be linked to the host institute.
And an additional thing is that you can even go budget in the sense that if the institute can support or can give you like some extra money if you bring the ERC, you can also include that in the budget. Postdocs, okay. Do you want to answer, Mangala?
Yeah, there was a question before that on is it a weak point writing the grant with an institution that is different from the one you currently work with? I would think not. Do you?
No, absolutely not. And it can even be good in the sense that you need to see again, because sometimes people see that staying in the same institute, can limit your possibilities. So for some people, it's very important that in the early career phase, you try a bit of different places. So it can go either way. So you should just choose the best for you. You can stay or go, but just as I was trying to say, try to think that the institute you chose is the right one for you.
And also, if you're going to leave the institute you're in, be aware that if you don't get the grant, you might not leave. So you don't want to, burn all your bridges behind you.
True, but it's fully true. But people also understand that you need to sometimes look around. So don't be also too shy on the other side, because I've seen sometimes people that they are afraid to say things, and that is also not necessarily an advantage. I mean, again, try to find a balance based on what you think is going to happen later. But it's normal also that you're applying for different places, and if you can justify the reasons, sometimes.
Yeah, but you could also apply for your current host institute, and then if you get the grant, you can always choose to move later. So you don't have to decide when you write the grant.
No. Yeah.
Do you want to take the next question on ideal composition of the team?
I think that depends a lot by what you propose, right? If you, like in my case, for instance, for the technical part, I really needed a postdoc because I didn't, have the direct experience that was necessary. So I cannot, supervise somebody from scratch because it would not be a good supervision. So I really looked for that part of the project for a postdoc that knew already a bit the technique, that could help developing the things in the lab as a bit more in a senior way. And then for the other part of the project, I could easily, which was more related to my own expertise, then it was easier to hire a PhDs. So I think you need, if you balance, again, look what you need.
Yes, that I agree. I think there's no fixed team. It also depends on how much you can fit into your grant. I mean, it depends on the country, how much a postdoc or a PhD student or your own salary costs, and then the equipment and further testing that you would need.
Yeah, and sometimes you can even, so if you are in an institute, in which you have a lot of master students available. So this is also like some institute work a lot with master students, some institute don't. But you can even name them if you count, for instance, of making a few experiments, the few small experiments, you know, with master students. You can also mention that. So everything is really possible. You can even include actual. What do you? I don't remember the terminology, but you can also have consultants. So you can reserve money to pay somebody as a consultant from another country, for instance.
Oh, and also like a contractor or something, right? There are all these special terms. Yes. There's a question on how many collaborators the grant is individual. It's your grant. Yeah. So no collaborators.
But if you are collaborating with somebody, you can mention it in the sense that it might strengthen the feasibility, but they will not get, it's really your money for your own group. And Harley, can we switch? That I don't know whether there is a limit, honestly.
I don't think there is.
No.
The next question.
At the beginning, I would say it's probably easier at the beginning because you are more interesting for another institution, right? Because you will bring more money compared to somebody that switches at the 4th year of the grant.
Yeah. But you might also, sorry, go ahead.
No, I finished.
You might also have PhD students or postdocs to move, so that's something to think about as well.
Yeah, true.
The question about the same project in both applications, that's not allowed.
No.
That's ethically not allowed. And I think you need to declare that you haven't submitted the project elsewhere. And also sometimes if you get 2 grants, you will have to reject one.
Yeah. Did you use an external agency consultant? Oh, so I used, honestly, the most useful comments I ever received for the written part came from colleagues that received an ERC. Sometimes university have the options. They have like a group of people that can read and go through. But I tried. But in my specific case, colleagues with an ERC were for me gave that more interesting comments. This is different. It was different for me, at least for the interview, where I have to say 2 things. One is that the first one of the first time I wrote a grant in general, it was not the ERC. It was with theater people that would help me to structure the voice and how I move, because of course, I mean, nowadays I don't know if it's going to be on Zoom or not, but when you go there in person, it's really nice to know how to breathe in this kind of aspect. But then the most successful practice I ever took were with people that were successful in other companies, even like in other total domains. Because when I gave my fake or mock interview with colleagues, they immediately go to the details of the project because they know a lot about it. So it's much more helpful when you, again, try to reproduce the variety of the people that you might encounter at the panel.
I fully agree. I think you need to, even when you're writing your proposal, it's very useful to have feedback from people who are not in your field, because it's not going to be people in your field who read it, or not only. And it's funny that you mentioned the theater group. I think I've worked with the same people, although that was after this, after the whole ERC. I didn't have any consultants or external agencies for this grant. I don't think that you necessarily need it unless you feel that your English isn't good enough or something like that. In that case, maybe that's worthwhile. I have used external agencies for larger grants where there are more than 10, 15 groups involved, because then it just becomes too much administrative work.
Yes,
I don't know. Yeah, but I don't know that you need it for this grant. But that said, I mean, you will need help from your host institute in drafting the budget and in all the administrative part. So there are more people involved than you in writing this.
But always check your budget yourself. because and work with administrative people, right? Because at the end it's you and your budget. Yeah.
Yes, and unfortunately, there's also restrictions on how much you can pay yourself.
Yes. True.
Yeah. Are there any other questions, or did we miss anything?
Doesn't seem so. At least the questions do not come up anymore. And I think we are also right on time, no? What do you think?
Yes, I think so. Okay, well, thank you, Valeria, and thank you, everyone, for paying attention. I guess we can close the room now, and the recording should stop automatically, I guess.
I guess. Thank you, Mangala, as well, and everyone for the interesting questions. Good luck with your submission.
Yeah, good luck. All right, thank you. Bye.
Yeah, bye.